Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Just a Few. My name is Patrick Antwine, and I use this platform to respond to questions submitted to me by people like you. These questions normally require some form of biblical context for their answers. If you have a question and you would like to submit it to me for possible response, please feel free to submit it via email to the email address on your screen, and I'll try to provide you with a response as soon as possible. Let's look at today's question, and it has to do with something that maybe you yourself would have heard somebody ask this question, and it's normally asked in the context of trying to show the Bible as not being a reasonable book. Let me jump to the question. The question is, where did Cain get his wife from? Cain, of course, being one of the sons of Adam in the book of Genesis. And like I said, sometimes people ask this question and a Christian might be stumped and they think, well, I don't know, because the Bible tells us Adam and Eve had two sons, one killed the other. Cain was alive, and then later on they have another son. And so where did his wife come from? Did he have children from his mother Eve? And that type of question, and people are confused. I responded in part to a question like this in a previous video dealing with some people even today question if there was more than one Adam and more than one Eve, and that the terms are not really names of individuals, but there's general terms that meant a male and a female, and there were many. So I dealt with that. If you're looking at this on YouTube, I may go ahead and put a link to that other video where I dealt with the question where or were there more than one Adam and so on. But let me address this issue for the questioner. The issue first of if there were probably many Adams and Eves and that's where Cain got his wife from, that is not biblical. Paul the Apostle addressed that issue in his epistle to the Romans, and as well as in a sermon in the book of Acts. So let me read a couple verses there first, and then I'll show you from Genesis where Cain would have gotten his wife from. Romans chapter 5 verse 12, we're looking at whether there could have been many Adams, many Eves also. Therefore, Romans 5 verse 12, therefore just as through one man sin entered the world, he's speaking of Adam, there was only one, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sin. So Christians don't try to say hide behind anything and say, well, there were many Adams, and that's the Bible just meant Adam to be one, but it's not really one Adam. No, the Bible, we stand by the conviction that God created one man and one woman originally. Drop down to verse 17 in that same chapter of Romans. For if by one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ. We don't say there are many Jesus Christ, and that was just a general term. There's only one Jesus Christ. Verse 18, therefore, as through one man's offense, Adam's sin, judgment came to all men, resulting in condemnation. Even so, through one man's righteous act, the act of Christ on the cross, the free gift came to all men, resulting in justification of life. For as by one man's disobedience, verse 19 says, many were made sinners, that's Adam's sin. So also by one man's obedience, many will be made righteous. So Paul is consistent that there was one Adam, and through him sin came into the human race. In Acts 17, verse 26, Paul, in preaching at Athens, said to the Greek philosophers, and he, God, has made from one blood, that's how he described Adam, every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling. So there was but one Adam. So to explain where Cain got his wife from, we don't need to bring in this theory that the word Adam means this mankind, and there were many. No, that's not taught in the Bible. It's going to contradict what I just read there. Well, to understand where Cain would have gotten his wife from, let me use an illustration and then take you back to Genesis. If I were to go to some deserted island somewhere, and there's nothing else there, and I take two animals with me, let's say 2 rabbits, a male and a female, and I just leave those 2 animals there on that island, and I leave and I come back several years later, what do you think I'm going to find? Just those 2 rabbits alone? And maybe some that were born directly off of them? No, we're going to find a colony of rabbits. And the question would have been asked, where did all those rabbits come from? It's obvious that they would have crossbred among themselves and very quickly populated the island. And that's the way it is with animals. They would procreate, and the younger ones, the new ones, would procreate among themselves, and then the procreation continues. Genesis chapter 5 verse 4. This is telling us about where death came from, really, but it talks there about Adam being the first person who had children and so on, and then eventually he died. After he begot Seth, this is a 3rd son born to Adam that is named. That doesn't mean there were no other children. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had, here's the key, he had sons and daughters. How come nobody asks what are the names of Adam's daughters? Well, the Bible doesn't mention it, but that doesn't mean he didn't have any. The Bible tells us here he had daughters. And in the beginning, God allowed and intended for the human race to be procreated through Adam's children were allowed to have sexual relations with each other and multiply. And in the beginning, that was allowed by God. When the flood took place and there was only Noah and his wife and Noah's 3 sons and their wives after the flood, and God told them to replenish the earth would have again have been replenished. By that time, they already had wives, and so it would have been cousins. The descendants of Noah's sons would have intermarried and populated the earth until eventually, by the time we get into the book of, let's say, Leviticus chapter 18, we see laws forbidding the Jews from marrying immediate or close relatives, because the DNA of the human race would have been corrupted so much by sin by then. You find that anybody who is into genetics will tell you, if you have sexual intercourse with someone who's of akin to you, very close, the DNA structure breaks down so that you produce unhealthy offspring. And we find that in royal families, and so try to preserve the bloodline, and they have all types of genetic issues that come up. But that's another thing altogether. But God forbid that later on. But in the beginning, that's the way God intended for the human race to become populated. And Cain would have gotten his wife from one of his sisters. And you may balk at that and think, well, whoa, that's the way God ordained it in the beginning, because sin had just about entered. The human DNA was so strong that it would have allowed for healthy offspring, unlike what I'm told happens now. If a brother and a sister have sexual relation and produce a child, the possibility of all types of issues biologically are real. So that's where Cain would have gotten his wife from. Genesis chapter 5 verse 4, Adam and Eve had many children, and it seems as if in the beginning, that's how God intended initially to procreate the human race. My name is Patrick Antwine. Hope that helps, and that it doesn't seem as if, well, the Bible doesn't explain it properly. It does, and I hope that response suffices. So